Thank you very much for joining us today in talking about connectivity issues and the differences in between Europe and Asia. Thank you very much to you for attending. Thank you to the speaker who agreed to take part in today's event. We've selected this topic as especially relevant because we are fully aware that nowadays connectivity is a fundamental part of the enterprises, and that there are underlying differences in between the European and the Chinese system. In order to better understand which are these differences and how can the enterprises be best prepared to face them and to correctly approach the Chinese market from this point of view, we've decided to provide this 1 hour and a half webinar. At the end of the main speech, there is going to be a Q&A session. So please do not hesitate to write your questions in the specific Q&A section inside the Zoom platform. And at the end of the main speech, we will do our best to reply to your queries. Without further ado, I would like to start by welcoming Ms. Federica De Curtis from the China IP SME Helpdesk, who is going to give us a quick presentation of their services. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Davide, and welcome to today's training session on connectivity issues. My name is Federica De Curtis, and I will very shortly introduce our project, the China IP SME Helpdesk introduction. So today I'm here on behalf of the China Intellectual Property Small and Medium Enterprises Helpdesk. And I would like to thank you again, Davide and the SME Centre for being here today, and also which is our partner, and Mr. Banning for his professionality and his contribution. So let me shortly introduce the Helpdesk, our project, which is in a nutshell, is an EU-funded project providing free initial advice to SMEs, so small and medium enterprises that are interested in trading with China and or maybe that are already present in the Chinese market in order to protect or enforce their intellectual property rights. More specifically, we cover the mainland China, but also other 3 jurisdictions, which are Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. We are present over the last 15 years, and we assisted over 100,000 European SMEs from the member state, but also from the other country of the single market program. So we are talking about countries such as Turkey, Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein. Going on, our most important service is our helpline. Here you can see and you can note down the address. Please feel free to get in touch with us for any kind of question that you might have on intellectual property rights and the strategy in China. It's free of charge, it's fast, because our helpline, we come back to you within 3 working days, and for sure it is confidential. You can use also the very same email address, not only to ask any kind of doubt, question that you might have, but also to book a 30-minute one-to-one session with our internal IP business advisor, Lisa, who is based in Beijing, in China, which can give you a more tailor-made confidential strategy. I would like to remember once again that all our services are free of charge because we are an EU-funded project. Here are the kind of services, so not only one-to-one session, not only this kind of major service, but also training, workshop and webinar as today's one, and also self-learning materials and a lot of other materials that you can easily find on our website. You can find our website. It's plenty of material that can help you in discover better some IP issue related in China, but also you can find some sector focused guides on our website. So as you can see, the China help desk is a part of the big family of the international IP SME help desk. We have also the Latin America, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and European IP help desk. So we offer the very same free resources to your small and medium enterprises with a different regional focus. So you can easily reach out on our social, on LinkedIn, on X, and also on YouTube, where we upload our webinar and we share plenty of our resources. So well, as you can see here, you can easily scan with this QR code in these couple minutes in case you would like to leave a feedback, but without going on, I would like to thank you again, Davide and EU SME Centre. So before leaving, please do not hesitate to reach out in case you have any kind of question on the China intellectual property rights related issues. I will leave in the chat also the email address that you can easily note down. So Davide, thank you again. I leave you the floor and to our speaker, today's speaker.
Thank you very much, Federica. Before moving to the key presentation, I would also like to invite Sarah Medina to the floor in order to present EU SME Centre and its services.
Thank you so much, David, and good morning to all our participants. And it's really my pleasure to be here talking about the EU SME Centre together with my two colleagues, David and Alessio Patino. Thank you so much, Serv Bonico, for joining us for this very interesting webinar. And thank you also for the IP Helpdesk for joining us. So the EU SME Centre, our purpose is really to help the European SMEs to enter into the China market. So this is an initiative funded by the European Union, and we are already in phase number 4. It goes until the end of next year, and we help the small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, from all the EU member states and also associated countries to get into the China market. So China is a very complex market, but with the help of the EU SME Centre, we can really get to help you and get your first step into this so interesting market. So we facilitate the market access, we provide a comprehensive range of services, and we organize also different types of activities. So you can access our self-diagnosis tool. It's an online tool that you can find in our website that measures your readiness towards the Chinese market. We can also provide you knowledge with different types of market reports across different sectors and guidelines and case studies. We also provide you advice with the practical and confidential information about China that is very useful to you. And we provide the training, so you can also book trainings with us. We organize, apart from webinars like this one, we can come to your organization, to your city, and we can do a workshop with you, with all your participants. If you are a Chamber of Commerce, if you are a trade agency, you can book directly a workshop with us. We also provide advocacy with a current and consistent and consolidated voice for the EU SMEs. Thank you so much for joining us again, and I'll pass the floor to my colleague, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Before moving on, I'd like to stress that our advice section is also extremely fast. We provide answers in usually up to 1 to 2 working days. And of course, as for the China IP SME Helpdesk being a new funded project, all of the services offered by EU SME Centre are completely free of charge. I would like then to move forward by, first of all, thanking Mr. Bunic, Product Director and Director of European Operations for CITIC Telecom CPC, who has joined today in order to present a core presentation on, as we said, I think here we are, on connectivity issues. This is going to be extremely interesting for European enterprises because we will have the chance to see what are the differences in between ICP licenses, public and private clouds, etc., in between Europe and China. We're going to evaluate what is the difference between China Office 365 versus the global version. And what are the compliance requirements, for example, for European SMEs, as well as the cultural and linguistic challenges that are related to this component. So without further ado, thank you very much, Mr. Sefconik, for being here with us today, and I leave you the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you also for giving us the opportunity to explain a little bit, and based on our experience that we have as a company, to explain the difference that we see between Europe and China. So what will we discuss today? Let me get to the right thing. So I will do a smart introduction about our company. So why are we even in a position to talk about this subject? And then I will talk about different regions, different ruling. So I will also talk a little bit about what we see in the EU. We also see a lot of ruling. So what are the rulings that comply to China? And you will see that some elements are even similar. They look the same. They are not exactly the same, but you will see that a lot of things which we currently also see happening in Europe, you also kind of see happening in China. But let's first go to the introduction. So I am part of CITIC Telecom CPC Global, and our organization has 2 major points. And if you also look at the bottom, we have around 60 POPs in mainland China. We also have connectivity in Macau, in Hong Kong, and also on Taiwan. So, and as earlier stated, these are different kind of regions. So I will talk mainly about mainland China as the key element, because there is also the most things different. And we also have a significant presence in Europe. And of course, we have cable systems running out of Europe directly into China. So what kind of things do we have? We have over 170 POPs on a global basis. We have 60 SD-WAN gateways, or also SASE gateways. We have IDCs all over the world. We currently deliver service in 160 countries. Main focus is already set Europe and in China. And we provide service towards around 16,000 customers. And of course, we have a very high reliable network and high redundancy. But the main point is we have a very significant presence in Europe and China. So that's a little bit about what we are as a company. And let's talk a little about different regions, different rulings. So if you look at the European Union has also been very busy to give all kinds of cross-union regulations. GDPR is, for example, an example of that. So regulation around personal data. We have the Digital Services Act, which is, by the way, now active for all companies with more than 50 employees. So we also need to comply to that. And that DSA, of course, preventing distribution of illegal content, products, and disinformation. And it also enforces, especially the big players, to give recommendations and personal timeline transparency. So how do they act? How do they come to these things? Other important element is the Network and Information Security Directive. And that's in principle started to improve the resilience of the economics of the different European member states. And in principle, it looks at addressing risks that threaten network and information systems, so cybersecurity attacks. So all companies, and this will be effective pan-European in October, or at least that's the deadline for local administration, to have this kind of things of effective. So this is follow-up of NIS 1. And NIS 2 will and force bigger and critical companies to take security measurements. So here you see something about personal data. How do you treat on the digital area? And how do you need to, from a law point of view, what kind of security measurements do you already need to take? So that's what we see in the European Union. So let's look a little bit about mainland China, what's happening there. And there I will talk about 5 different subjects, which may be important for you if you are going to start activities in mainland China. Again, this is mainland China. I can also answer some questions on Macau, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, but these rulings are not applied to these areas, only mainland China. So, for example, in Europe, if you want to buy an international line between the Netherlands and Germany, you go to a provider, you buy it, and it's all fine. In principle, it kind of works the same within China if you go cross-border, but you need to bear a couple of things in mind. So if you look at the real cables that go cross-border in the country, that's more related to CTC-UCM, and sorry for my terminology, that's China Telecom, China Unicom, and China Mobile. These are licensed to own cables that go cross-border. Licensed operators use these circuits to deliver services. So we also buy, for example, from CTC-UCM, and we deliver services on top. And the typical type of private connectivity, so not public, but private connectivity, will be layer 2, so Ethernet or MPLS. So that's a little bit for your understanding. I'm not quite sure as an SME you will buy it a lot, but maybe you want to buy some stuff. The only thing that you need to bear in mind in that sense, buy it from a licensed operator. The other thing, and I will come back later to that, it doesn't mean that you're free to do anything you want on that line. You still need to comply to local legislation. A good example of that would be cross-border data compliancy. So if you're going to send data back and forth across the border in China, you need to comply to certain regulations. I will touch later on how significant that is and what it will mean to you. Then, if we look at Chinese internet connection, because we talked about private connectivity, that's fully reserved for you. But if you look at China internet connection, of course, in principle, you could reach the rest of the internet, because that's the principle of the internet. But in China, you will probably already know, or you already have found out, that the internet has local characteristics. So if you are having an internet connection in China, or you are having an interconnection in Europe, you will see that some applications and some performance will be significantly different to what you will experience in Europe. The performance doesn't, by definition, have to do with regulation, also in the way how the internet has been set up. But please bear in mind that it will be different. And another important thing, that if you are going to buy an internet connection in China, you need to comply to a set of local legislation. So that's called ICP. Let me step into that area. So this is important if you are hosting in China and if you are using any form of local internet access. Then as a customer, you need to do what they call an ICP registration. And if you also go to Chinese websites, you will find that number also at the bottom. So the ICP registration. So one of the things is that a user in China, if it goes to such a website, it knows it's fully registered and complies to all legislation. Come back later about what kind of different licenses and registrations are applicable. And that also means that the website which may be running on that specific IP address can be promoted without any shape or form through legal channels within China. So you will not be in any shape or form having an issue. So, conclusion, if you want to have something within public internet connection, you need to complete ICP registration procedure before the IP address will be provided by the provider. So it's not in that sense something that the provider will just give you the IP address and then you need to comply. In most situations, the provider will not even give you the IP address because they will be liable for that. The ICP registration is applied to China registered enterprise only. If you don't have that, I will not say it's impossible, but it will make it way more complicated. I would always advise to choose the road, if possible, to have a registered enterprise which is located in China. Also bear in mind that the process is typically in local language. So you probably also, or you have your own local people on the ground that can deal with that, or you need to find a partner that can help you with that. Another important item to highlight and also to understand is that when the website is located outside mainland China, and mainland China also means, for example, Hong Kong, ICP regulations will not apply. So if you will even have a website in Europe with Chinese wordings and everything else targeted for the China market, theoretically, you don't need to have an ICP regulation or license, and people out of China could reach that. But there will be potential issues with performance in that sense. And also, this website will not have a ICP registration, which may be an issue if you're going to use that and promote that web page in China. So again, if you really want to focus in China, do stuff there, make a registered enterprise there, and also get an ICP license. The other thing what you need to remember, there are different kind of categories with a different level of procedures that are related to ICP licenses. So you have if you use the website for a non-commercial activity, you can just get away with it with an ICP filling. So it also means that you are limiting yourself to the number of activities that you can run on this IP address, because it's all linked to this IP address. And then next step would be in a commercial license, so which will allow you to do some online selling of goods and services, and or an hosting server, or even CDN with mainland China. So that's also an important element in that sense. And then you have a third level of license, EDI license, and that's online data exchange and processing. So in that sense, it goes to be a little bit higher than a normal commercial license, because there's automatic interaction between you and the outside world. One other thing, I'm not quite sure if you're going to do that, but if you would decide to develop a mobile app in the app stores in China, you also need to have an ICP license. So even though typically most of the ICP license has to do with the fact that you are looking at internet connectivities, you also need to be aware that for a mobile app, you also need to have an ICP license. So that's a little bit the story regarding internet connectivity in China, and we talked about cross-border connectivity. Then other things which you may typically decide to use or not to use are cloud providers, or for example, SaaS providers or SASE providers. If you go into mainland China, you will see on the left-hand side, you will see a lot of logos, which you also know from your current environment that we have in Europe. So you will see Alibaba Cloud at the left top, Tencent Cloud, Huawei Cloud, of course, native Chinese. You will see for SASE, Zscaler, Cloudflare, and Kato. AWS is also present in China under the brand, in the same way as Office 365 and Microsoft Azure. You also will see that some clouds or services will not be present in China at all. Example of that will be Google Cloud, and the other one will, for example, will be Palo Alto from SASE. And if you are looking then and you want to integrate it all into one level, or it will not integrate fully seamlessly, because there are limitations in the functionality that you will see in mainland China and that you will see in the rest of the world. And the second thing is there will be limitations on cross-border information exchanges, which will limit that. So you need to be aware that even though it looks the same, it feels the same, it's not exactly the same. And also for your understanding, if you look at Microsoft Azure or Office 365, it's not fully owned in that sense by Microsoft, but it's a local partnership with another Chinese company. So that's what you also need to bear in mind if you look at all this functionality. There will be differences in that sense, and it will not act seamlessly. And but typically that would be also, if you're starting up, you were looking at cloud solution, you were looking at SASE solutions. So you need to be aware of these kind of things. So then another thing, which all has to do with security levels of your systems. So there is something called multi-layer protection scheme, For the network guys of that, it's not MPLS, but MLPS, which in principle defines, is similar, like a little bit like NIS2 in that sense, up to what level you need to make sure that the security of your IT systems, up to what level that has been arranged. So that's something that you need to be aware of. So what are the steps that you will see happening in that sense? The first thing that you will need to do a certain grading. So, and I will come back a little bit later how that grading works. But in principle, you're going to look at every separate IT system that you have and what level of security requirements are required there. Then you will need to go to a registration level to make sure that that will be a local registration. And then you will need to do a gap analysis based on the fact that you have decided that, okay, this is the level I need to comply to, and this is the level where I'm currently at. And then you need to fix that gap, which may or may not exist. The other thing is, depending on the grade level, you will require to have an official assessment by an external party. And depending on the grade level, you will need to repeat this evaluation on a regular basis. So that could be from each 6 months to once, twice a year. But that all depends on the level that you are. The official documentation, just for your background information, are standing below. So that's what you will see happening. It's active, I think, since 2019, this one. So if we are looking at the grading of the systems, the first thing that you need to do is define the protection level. And that in principle is based on the fact, if something goes wrong, what will be the impact on Chinese society, on your operations and everything else. So, and there are also, that's one of the axes. And the other one is importance. So the first thing more has to do with society as overall. Second level of importance is social order or public advantages. And the highest level is national security. So what you will see on the right-hand side, you will see the different levels. So the first level is relatively small, and there is not a lot of interaction with the outside world. It's a form of self-assessment. So you make the conclusion it's level 1, then the gaps will be minor to 0. Then level 2, then you will need to do some additional work in that sense to make it happen. And in level 3, then you will need to do some serious measurements or measures to protect your environment. I also will pinpoint a little bit what it means in practice, because this is official regulation. There are practical ways, especially as an SME, how you want to deal with this. So, and level 4 or 5 typically will not happen to you. That's more related to government. Also, if you look at what we are delivering towards our customers, level 3 is the highest that we will do. We don't have data centers that go up to level 4 or systems delivered that go even up to level 5. That typically will not be done by us. But level 1, 2, 3 are elements where we also can help our customers, and there are other partners that can help you with. So let's look at some examples on what that means. So, for example, here we have a online retailer with some manufacturing. So there is a database and application on the left-hand side with membership information, user information, and product information. Then you have a outlet towards your customers where you have membership information. You also have the stock information, and you also have order information in a sense. And then you would have a manufacturing site. I'm not saying that you need to manufacture everything in China from now on, but this is more an example level. So, and I already talked earlier about, you need to be smart about what you are doing and when you need to comply to this guidelines. Key considerations, especially because level 3, that's something when it gets serious. If you are public facing, if you process a lot of personal information, you will get fairly quickly up to level 3 and you will need to do some action. And if you're going to do local e-commerce in China, if that's the case, then definitely you need to pay a lot of attention. If you just have a public website and you put and you only have limited activities from that website to the Chinese market, or you only have even no website, then the information and protection level will typically fall back to a level 1. So as I said, you need to do this on a per information system level. So if you look at the table, the information systems are mentioned there. So we have office automation, that's a level 1. We have a manufacturer system, also level 1. ERP, slightly different, because at least you are getting also some customer information in there, and the membership information, which is personal data and publicly available, will becoming a level 3 element. So that means that in this case, probably you at least, I would say that the company website and the membership system, you will definitely need to register it and need to take proper action to make it work. And by the way, I'm just telling you the general guidelines. Yeah? So I'm giving you pointers in where you need to investigate. If you want to be absolutely sure, you need to work with a local Chinese partner to get everything figured out, because there may be some flexibility in the local legislation. And for example, if you look here at the fairly simple one, you have some things that you want to share, and then the level 2 will be a company website, because that's public facing in your core business system as it collects some critical information. So as I said earlier, enterprise systems will typically not go beyond level 3 protection, and you really need to look, especially if you do some e-commerce, public things, or personal data. That's our strong triggers for you to look at what do I need to do in this area of MLPS. Okay, so that's a little bit about how you qualified, but what does that typically mean? So if you are looking here at the measures that you need to take for a level 2, you need to have, if you have a cloud or IDC, you need to have some controls on that. You need to have a firewall in place, an IDS in place, IPS, antivirus, UTM, WAF, and a data backup. So that's typically protection measurements that you will need to get in place on a level 2. If you go to a level 3, in principle, the first 8 are the same. But you will also see then in that case, you need to do some behavior analysis, so 0-day protects. You need to have a log system. You need to have access control and access gateway. And now the data backup is also going to include recovery. So that's now marked as redundancy. But these are all systems and security measurement that you typically already need to think about. So let's not. So from that point of view, a lot of things will already be in place. And also you need to bear in mind that we in Europe have an ISO 27001 a ruling or standard, and there are a lot of things which match also with the MLPS. So again, as I earlier said, for example, we have NIS2 in Europe. This is a little bit more stringent and a little bit complex and a little bit different, but in principle, it does a lot of the same things if you are looking at the level of security which is going on. Then, so what are the key elements of you're looking at MLPS? So which type of customers must perform this? In principle, all customers that have an entity registered within mainland China and an information system within mainland China would need to comply. But as I already said, there are some bigger triggers that really requires you to look into that. But you need to make a conscious decision. What are you going to do? Within MLPS, the leveling of a system and also the measurements that you take on that systems are done on a per system level, and you will have different grades. So website could be level 2, membership system level 3, internal office automation level 1. So this ruling only applies again when it's in mainland China. So MLPS, it's not applicable for Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. So that's something which you need to be aware of. So then, if you look at an assessment scope, in principle, there are 2 perspectives where you need to look at. You need to look at the technical perspective, and you need to look at the management perspective. So what do you have installed, and how do you work with that part? But again, you need to the journey starts with the fact that you need to look at a level of grading that you need to put on your system itself. So that's all about security levels. then talk a little bit about cross-border data connectivity. So that's compliance. So when do you need to do a security assessment for cross-border data transfer? And again, at a later point, I will also point out what it means in practice. So don't be overwhelmed by this. But this is in principle the general guideline, and then I will trim it down and make it more practical. So if the data processor provides important data abroad, and I will come back what important data means. He processes personal information over 1 million people and provides this information abroad. And the third line, and that's provided, so that's raw information over 100,000 people or sensitive personal information. Also, I will come back to that later, what the difference is between personal information and sensitive personal information of 10,000 people, and that's over a complete year. Again, abroad. So there you see that we talk about, first of all, important data, then processed personal data, and then raw personal information and sensitive personal information. And there is, but that's also a little bit what you need your common sense to think about. Any other circumstance where an application for security assessment of cross-border is required by the National Cyberspace Administration. I'll also give you an example later on where, well, already the ruling applies to that, but there would be something that you don't immediately think about as an issue for cross-border data transfer, but it was, and I will come back to that later. So how do you get a security assessment for the cross-border data transfer? National Cybersecurity Administration for a security assessment of the cross-border data transfer to the local provincial cyberspace administration. So this is an activity which you will do at a provincial level. So again, don't be overwhelmed with that. And again, you know, if you really want to go into this path, then you need to also talk with your local partners who can deal with that and can help you with that. So let's talk a little bit more about sensitive personal information and important data. So personal information. You know, in short, all information that can be linked back to a person. Simple. If you want to know the exact definitions, there are the ruling that you can find it in, and you can also find it in the Personal Information Protection Law. And then you have something which they call sensitive personal information. And that means that any information which is leaked, which could endanger the safety of the person and may result in some personal reputation, physical, mental health, or discriminatory treatment. So, for example, if you would have some diet limitations about lactose-free and everything else, I had a discussion with somebody else who works for an international Dutch company, who even had a big discussion about the fact if they can, where they can keep that information, how they need to classify it. In the end, they came to the conclusion it will be sensitive personal information. The other thing, and I'm not quite sure, but it depends on the market that you're working on, any personal information of a child below 14 and 14 itself is considered sensitive personal information. So again, regulation 35273, where you can find it back. And then there are some additional elements. These are the two key elements, but I still want to bring that out because you have the personal information that we already talked about. Then you have personal privacy. And then you have personal sensitive information. But again, what I said, the most critical elements in these kind of consideration are personal information and sensitive personal information. Please bear in mind that in all the situations we are talking about thresholds. So it's not that if you have one sensitive personal information, then by definition you have a problem. It always also talks about volume, which also will bring me back later about the fact that not by definition you will be exposed to these kind of things. So then, if we're then looking at key important information. So there are, as always, different types. So the first set of information is in principle data which is available in any shape or form and which is publicly available. But if you want to change it, destroy it, leak it, or use it in a legal way, that it has impact on national security or public interest. So these are not, by definition, state secret and personal information. But you need to bear in mind that if you collect a lot of statistics and do derived data based on large amounts of personal information, that may still be marked as important data. So that's a link which you have out of the personal information area, and that it may not fall under any legislation on the cross-border, but it will become important data if you do some statistic and derived data around it. And then there is something else, which in principle is undisclosed governmental information. So that's something which you definitely cannot, and by the way, it will already be tricky to get your hand on that, especially as an SME. But that could be seen as important information, which also could, for example, be based on sensors that are placed at a specific location within China. If that would be, which would be very unlikely, but if you would be in a building where there are national services which are sensitive from a Chinese point of view, then that's also something which will fall in this category. Okay, having said that, if you are starting as an enterprise and you're setting things up, what's then important data? In general, enterprise production, operation, and internal management information and personal information does not require you to have some security assessment on the cross-border data communication. So I also put a source of all this information behind that. And again, if you are talking about retail, lots of personal information and e-commerce kind of information that you're going to send back and forth cross-border, that are typical triggers. That will mean that you will need to look into that, and you probably need to take action to do a security assessment on that part. So that's important. Then another thing, very, very interesting one. So August last year, until that time, Tesla transferred all his data back to probably Texas. I'm not quite sure where they have the main databases of all the information. And there was at a certain point in time that the Tesla was driving around on a main airport in China and also other areas. And there were even actions taking place that Teslas were blocked to go into that area. So you need to bear in mind you have an open road and then it says not allowed for Teslas, or even they will not tell you and you're not allowed to go there. Because the Tesla was was concerns out of Chinese government that they were collecting a lot of information of buildings and everything else, and which could be marked as important and or sensitive. So last year, Tesla decided to make sure that all the data that was generated within China, mainland China, would stay in mainland China. So that also has to do with the part that you may think about, okay, I have a sensor, he sees a little bit around for my driving, what can be the issue? Well, because there was some concern that maybe Tesla would be recording or having visibility on elements that you don't want to be made publicly available. So that's one of the things that could happen. Again, if you look as enterprise, especially also SME, the likeliness that you will run into these kind of regulations is very limited in that sense. Okay, let's do a short summary. So if you are buying private cross-border connectivity, it's not that complicated. Buy it from a licensed operator, but please bear in mind you need to comply to other rulings if applicable. If you're going for the internet, ICP filing and license is required. What kind you need to have, that will fully depend on how the connection is used. So I gave you some guidelines on that. And public SASE, public cloud and SASE, they are the same logos. A lot of functionality is the same, but not always the same. Not everything will be available. And do not assume that if you will have Azure or Microsoft Office 365 up and running in China, that you can seamlessly interact with the rest of your community. MLPS cybersecurity ruling, in principle mandatory for all companies in mainland China, so you need to look at it. And but you also need to be smart of that, what I already talked to you about. But if you're getting into the level of level 3 or even level 2, you will need to have an external assessment institution to clearly mark that everything is fine and you can do that. Cross-border data policies, typically for most situations, you probably do not have to worry about that. But again, as I said, if there will be triggers, then you definitely would advise you to talk with a local party to see if such an assessment is required. And again, for basic enterprise operation, no such security assessment is required. So that's a little bit what I wanted to share with you in that sense. And I'm definitely open for questions to give you a little bit point. So we as a company are advising also a lot of parties on that. And we're delivering connectivity, we deliver security services, we're delivering cloud services and also data house services. So that's also the reason that we run into this in a daily basis. And hopefully it helps you to prepare if you want to go to China and also require some ICT infrastructure. So that was my story. I think we're open for questions. Davide.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was extremely interesting, I think, extremely comprehensive as well. We've received a couple of questions throughout the presentation. If there are any additional questions, please, I remind you that you have a chance to post them in the Q&A section under the platform. So I would like to start with a first question related to selling software in China. So if an enterprise were to sell its software in the Chinese market, do they need any license? And such licenses that can be obtained as foreign companies?
So we are not a full expert in software creation and having parties to do that. But it will be very likely that depending on what you are doing, what I can see already happening from our side, is that you will need to definitely take a close look at that. Because if you're going to launch software, somewhere in your system you will collect personal data. You probably will go very quickly. If you do a mobile app, you definitely need to have a ICP license, for example. If you are doing using an internet to also communicate with the world, doing updates and everything else, ICP license is already required. And if you are doing updates and everything else and have some other systems which are related to your software, you already need to go to an MLPS. So I think that based on what I know, there are already requirements which will protect, in that sense, the digital space in China already based on that element. Of course, there are general laws about what you can do with software. I am not aware that you need to have a specific license for a software. But with all the supporting systems that you will have, you will need to have assessments and you will need to have licenses. There may be specific software areas where I can imagine you will need to get a special license, but again, I'm not the expert on that. So it's part of the answer, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. And on the other hand, moving on to data and the classification of data. We talked a lot about important data, about the various levels. I wanted to ask, R&D data, would they be considered as important data?
In print, it depends on. That probably that more has to do with if you are going to open an enterprise in China, about how you need to share IP or R&D information. R&D information is not by definition important data, and that's something again you need to look about what will be the impact on society if that information is leaked. I would strongly advise our partners to work together with their Chinese partners to make sure that they protect that critical information for themselves as much as possible. So you also need to bear in mind that if you are just going to, you need to acknowledge that if you have MLPS, it's not a business decision, it's a regulatory decision. So if you have for your company critical business data, you just need to protect that. So that can go beyond the MLPS part. If you look at the important data being transferred back and forth, that could be the case, but then you really need to look at the exact data which is being collected and what you are going to do with that. If there would be personal data incorporated in that, because you do some data mining again, then you very quickly will data cross-border policy. But specific looking R&D data, unfortunately, I need to give the answer. It very much depends on what the R&D data is, and then probably will spend more time on what you will agree with your local Chinese partner about this data.
We also have a question related to EDI licenses. In this specific case, the question is related to the fact that if there is a company that is managing a NAP in China, would they still require this license?
Can you rephrase the question? I'm not fully getting it.
Yeah, I think that we have a bit of information missing. Overall, the idea is that if you are managing an app, I think once again a software or a mobile app, if they require an EDI license to operate in China.
Well, if you have a mobile app, you need to have a separate ICP license, which is different than the EDI license. So if you would have, for example, a website which has this interactive with the outside world, plus you have a mobile app, you need to have 2 licenses. So that's to begin with. The other element that you need to bear in mind is that the main reason why this has been deployed, that if there would be a breach or things would be going not in a proper way with the content which will be related to that IP address, that the Chinese government can go to a natural person and ask them, okay, what's going on there? What are you doing there? This is not according to the law. So there will be a person related to that IP address. And even if you would host that on a platform, so the application on a platform, typically that platform owner will say, I will give you an IP address, but the ICP license will be related to you. That's the typical approach. If there would be a software as a service kind of thing with an EDI, then probably the platform owner has made the decision that he will take the personal responsibility for the ICP license, but he will also strictly manage the platform then in that sense. So you need to go back and look at the purpose on why they have done that. So if there are some undesired behavior happening related to that IP address, they want to go directly to the person that's responsible for that behavior. So that's you need to bear in mind. So I hope I answered the question there. But that has to do with the fact that, because, for example, if we would just say, you don't worry, we will request an ICP license for you, and then the person using that IP address does things that are not in line with local regulations, we as a company can be sued. And we as a company can be forced to shut down. So you will find a lot of reservation regarding these licenses. And they will typically put it towards the end user.
That's clear. Moving on to another very specific and hands-on, let's say, approach kind of question. In the case of a cross-border e-commerce store, which is hosted in China, if the enterprise collects personal data of the customers, they ask what kind of measures they need to protect this data.
There will be, there are two levels. So first of all, if you do personal data and e-commerce, I would definitely first advise to go to the MLPS circus. Then the second thing, I would definitely talk with a local advisor about the assessment of the security assessment of the cross-border data. So what happens in that procedure is that local governments will look at what exactly and up to what level information is sent cross-border. So that means that based on that, they will say it's allowed or it's not allowed. So if you are getting into e-commerce personal information kind of thing, and especially e-commerce, I would advise to talk with a local partner to see, do we need to do a security assessment? And then if that's the case, you follow that procedure. And the reason that, and it may even be the case that it's still allowed. It doesn't mean it will not be allowed. But what will be the issue that if there would be a trigger or a normal situation, which would have required you to do a security assessment, and something goes wrong, even if you're hacked or whatever, you have a problem. If you have done a security assessment and then you're hacked or things that has happened, you still have a problem, but not as big. So that's how you need to look at it. I understand it's slightly vague, but if it gets vague or you see these triggers, I would strongly advise you to find local guidance on what you need to do. In the same way, how principally, Tesla in the beginning probably didn't do a good security assessment, and there they decided, okay, in the long term, to keep it in China. I hope this answers the question.
I hope so. I think it does.
Okay.
And if there are any other questions, please do not hesitate to pose them. In the meantime, I would like to maybe ask you to provide a bit of a sum up of what we've discussed today. So, what would be, in your opinion, the 2-3 key takeaways that European enterprise should take from what we've discussed today in this meeting?
I think the biggest thing, compliance in applying to ruling is not unique to China. You also have it in Europe, but there are differences. That's one thing. The second thing, have a normal curiosity about things that may look the same, but go one step further and investigate how it is. And thirdly, even though you have to deal with a lot of regulations, don't be scared of it too much and use your common sense. That's a little bit what my advice would be, listening or of my presentation. So I think that sums it up.
Thank you very much. Then we have another specific question related in this case to an hypothetical AI company based in Europe, which would like to access the Chinese market. So in that case, what regulations in China would they need to take into account? And in this case, would cooperation with a local company be a good idea?
Okay, the AI is a very broad topic in that sense. So that probably is a more specialized request. If you are going from outside China and have a website outside China to collect some information, and based on that you run some AI or whatever, you can do that. You are not have a legal problem, but you may be experiencing low performance for a Chinese market. So it also depends a little bit about, okay, what exactly do you want to do? And also regarding AI, let's also bear in mind that if you're looking at the cloud capabilities within China, they have limitations from AI power or AI capabilities. So that's also something that you need to bear in mind, that maybe services that you can buy in AWS in Europe may not be available in China in that sense. So and also if you are going to work with AI and algorithms, I can imagine that will be a sensitive thing, and I would probably advise, but you need to also look at the IP part in that sense, to partner with the local Chinese partner. This is a complex thing which has high attention, but you also need to bear in mind again that the execution of the AI capabilities within China will be limited. And even if you have some information collected out of that, how do you get it out? So in the end, it falls down to the end. So we need to have more specific information to understand what would be the good idea.
We also have another question that could be extremely interesting. Would a representative office in China be considered the same as an enterprise? So would they have to follow the same regulation as a full-fledged enterprise?
You mean just a registered office?
Yeah, a representative office, yeah.
Yeah, well, it depends on a registered office would be very useful, for example, if you are let's put it differently. If you are looking what you are doing with the IT systems, that will depend how you are treated. So as I already stated, it will be very useful or almost mandatory to get an internet connection to have a local Chinese entity. But then it depends what are you going to do with the Chinese entity. Because if you request an ICP license, you probably will put a system behind that. And then the question is what kind of system which will fall back to which ICP license. Then the question is if you are going to have some systems behind it, where are they sitting in the security range? So it's not that you can say having only an office or a registered company enterprise. There are a lot of differences between that. As I already pointed out, if you don't do a lot with personal information in e-commerce, a lot of the legislation probably will not in practice apply to you. So it more has to do with the fact if you're a registered company and up to what level you explore or execute activities within China, that will determine what is required. So in my view, enterprise and registered company, if it's an empty registered company where you do nothing with, or maybe some payments or whatever, I don't know. But if you do nothing with an infrastructure level, of course, you don't need to comply to almost anything. But if you want to use ICT infrastructure in China, then it will be linked to this entity, and then things will start, even if you have limited to no people there. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Thank you very much. I see we don't have any additional questions for now. I would then like to once again start by thanking you, sir, for taking the time to be with us today. I think it was an extremely interesting session. I believe there are a lot of potential follow-up questions. Actually, I see that we have before closing, since we have a little bit more time, I see that we have also an additional question about the VPN. This is a bit. This is related to the fact that it's interesting to know which would be the minimum internet connection setup needed to ensure to have a functional and stable VPN in between a Chinese branch and the European HQ.
Okay. Interesting question by definition. VPN tunnels in principle are not allowed to begin with to go outside of China. So if you are going to set up a VPN, you need to be aware of that there are very strong limitations what you can put over. Even if you don't put it on the VPN, but you will keep it fairly open, there could be the amount of traffic or the quality that you will get outside China will be limited. There are different grades of internet in China where you can play around with, but that will be a very, very specific question where there are possibilities there. But that's a really deep question in that sense, because then you really need to look what can and cannot happen. Other things what we see happening with our customers is that we use to overcome this challenge and don't want to have a too costly solution, that local parties buy a internet connection and will run SD-WAN or SASE over that to bring the connectivity back to Europe or cross-border. And that's also a way of dealing with it. So to summarize, yeah, you need to look at a very specific internet solution to see how that will or will not work. What we typically see happening for smaller customers is that we are looking at SASE or SD-WAN to ensure a good quality connectivity back cross-border. And for bigger enterprise, we use dedicated private services like Ethernet and MPLS. But again, still bear in mind that you may have some cross-border or other legislation that you need to comply to. So don't assume, bottom line, if you buy an internet and you put a VPN on top, Bob is your uncle. You need to talk with local parties and see what they can do with that.
Perfect. I would also like to invite you, sir, to include your email address in the chat. Should anyone be having further questions that they would like to...
Will you question for that? I will try to do that. No worries. But you're also going to share the slides in that sense?
Yes, we are going also to share the slides if possible.
Yeah, no, I already shared that with you. That's a slide pack in the PDF. So that's also fine. That will also include my email address and also will show my LinkedIn profile. So if you want to understand a little bit more about my background and the company that I'm working for, and I'm typing my email address as we speak. Let me see if it's right, because this is one is a lifetime opportunity, of course. It's now part of the chat. So hold on, is it only to you or not? Hold on.
Yeah, I think it's a direct message to
every can chat with. Does anybody else see it or not? Does it only go to you? I'm not sure.
It should be to me only. This is a direct message.
To everyone. We fixed that.
Yeah, and I see that we also have a final question. I would like to ask you to if you should be having access to the Q&A section, the very last one that has been published. I would like to ask you to read it yourself, because it's a little bit long, so I wouldn't want to lose any content in reproducing the question. I can see that most of the queries that we are receiving now are highly personalized as well. So I would also like to take the chance to remind everyone that EU SME Centre also has a Next expert function. So if you have any queries that you would like to ask.
I have a look at the last question and I'll repeat it a little bit. So if you're a EU company, produce products, measurements, instruments in the B2B segment, and your advantage is that you can share optimization data and IDs with your client, but you also want to analyze, compare data at HQ in the EU in order to have best practice static information. How problematic is that? In that case, I would access to instruments is important in order to optimize the functionalities. Well, all depends what you are collecting and where you are collecting it. So, for example, if you are, it will be passed. Okay. So if you are, for example, if you look at Tesla, the reason why Tesla became a big thing, because the car went to airport areas where Chinese government thought they were measuring important information, and then it became a tricky element, So if you are not doing that, it all depends on the actual information, and then it is important to make such decisions and be careful what you produce back. Then I would advise you to do a security assessment on cross-border functionality. But it all falls down if you go back to an important data element, besides the personal information, which has a little bit more clear definitions about the level. But if you look at the important data, you see two categories. Well, I assume you're not sharing or collecting governmental information, but then it more becomes that if it will be misused or used in a different way, it can disrupt society. So I would strongly advise you to make sure that you will have a security assessment on that part. I also see some other questions popping up. Hold on. We already talked about.
No, I think we should have replied to most of the questions.
Okay.
I don't know if there are any additional ones incoming. I take the chance. I also provide a couple of additional seconds for anyone who would like to type in a last question before we end the webinar. I would like to thank all the organizers of this event, of course, EU SME Centre, the China IP SME Helpdesk, CITIC Telecom CPC. It was extremely interesting to discuss these topics today. I think it is fundamental for the enterprises to have an overview of which were the differences, of which are the differences in between the European and the Chinese system. As always, being well informed is the first step in order to avoid any potential trouble and issues in the future. So if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. Also by email, you have EU SME Centre information. You can find also our LinkedIn and WeChat accounts in the QR code that you can see now. You have CITIC Telecom also email address of Serve for any specific question you would like to address to him. It has been a pleasure for us to have this very short webinar, but very instructive webinar as well. So if there are no additional questions, I would like to thank everyone for taking part today. Thank all the speakers that took part in this session, that took the time to stay with us this morning or this afternoon in the Chinese case. And once again, I would like to invite everyone to keep following EU SME Centre activities, and hopefully we will have the chance to meet again in another training soon. So thank you very much to everyone. Once again, it was a pleasure, and goodbye. Have a nice day.